The Vanishing Rasengan is one of Boruto's most underrated jutsus. Having the ability to go completely undetected gives it a unique advantage, which comes in handy against enemies who would have otherwise been able to negate it. This is due to a change in chakra nature that occurred when Boruto combined it with his lightning nature element, as explained in the anime. But is that really the case? You see, there is another element to this ability that hasn't been revealed as yet, and it has something to do with Boruto strongly inheriting the powers of the otsutsuki. Now this might seem like a stretch and you guys can tell me if it is, but at least hear me out first. To get a full understanding of what I'm about to say, let's first start with the fact that it was never actually stated that Boruto's Vanishing Rasengan was as a result of Boruto infusing it with lightning nature chakra, at least not in the movie or manga. Instead, the exact verbiage is that the Rasengan adds a sudden change in chakra nature, or that Boruto unconsciously transformed its nature, creating a new jutsu. The lightning addition actually came from the anime adaptation, which isn't really a problem for what I'm about to say since both can be true at the same time, along with the fact that the concept I'm about to mention wasn't introduced as yet, which is an otsutsuki's ability to erase their chakra signature. You see, there's so much more to this ability aside from becoming invisible. It's almost as if it blinks out of existence itself. This was shown when Boruto used the ability to attack Momoshiki in chapter 10. Momoshiki initially sensed the ability and turned around to absorb it, but once it became invisible, he just disengaged, assuming the ability fizzled out, which led to him getting slapped by the ability when it reappeared. Now one would argue that this is perfectly logical since he couldn't see it, but when you take into account the fact that he has a heightened sensory ability, he should have been able to sense the attack coming even if he couldn't see it. Characters have done this multiple times in Naruto, even Momoshiki himself. This was shown back in chapter 5 when Momoshiki first attacked the Chunin exams. Naruto tried to attack him from behind, but Momoshiki was able to dodge him even without his Byakugans being active. That's because just like Naruto, who can fight while having his eyes closed as seen in the battle versus Pain, Momoshiki also possesses heightened sensory abilities, thus being able to dodge attacks without seeing them. Now even putting heightened sensory abilities aside, he also possesses multiple renegans that were looking in that direction along with his own Byakugans, even though they weren't active. So at least taking the renegans into account, he should have still been able to see the chakra form of the attack even if the attack itself wasn't visible on the light spectrum. This would be similar to how Pain could see Tsunade charging chakra in her feet back in Shippuden. That's because the Renegon has the ability to see chakra itself, even while not visible to the naked eye, similar to the Byakugan. Yet for some reason Momoshiki wasn't able to see Boruto's Vanishing Rasengan. Mind you, even Sasuke himself wasn't able to see the jutsu with his Renegon once it disappeared. This is alright confirmed by him saying that he thought it was a failure at first, but it wasn't. He only noticed it after seeing the damage it caused to the tree on the other side. Mind you, this is the same Renegon that could see Madara's Limbo clones that existed on another plane of existence. So Rasengan simply becoming invisible while existing in the same dimension should be a piece of cake in comparison, but it wasn't. Then you also have the fact that he couldn't see it or sense it when Momoshiki used it against him in chapter 54, even though he had his Sharingan active. This is the same Sharingan that can perceive the flow of one's chakra, which similar to jutsus like the Vanishing Rasengan is invisible to the naked eye. To me, this implies that this Rasengan isn't just becoming invisible. The chakra nature of the technique is also being erased. That is the only way to explain why the dojutsu known for seeing invisible chakra can't see it. That's the only way to explain why they can't sense it, even though they should still be able to, even if it's invisible. Now, one would argue, or some would argue, that this can't be the case based on the timeline of when the ability was introduced, but that's not necessarily true. You see, the ability itself was introduced in chapter 61, when Inojin mentioned that the only way for someone to enter the village undetected would be by erasing their chakra signature. This is due to the sensory net that surrounds the village, which detects enemies when they enter and also people when they leave. Now Kawaki heard about this, of course, and somehow found out that he also possessed the ability to do so and used it to escape the village undetected. What's important to note here is that Ada, who saw this happen with her Senringan, informs Code of this, and later states that it's a trick that naturally comes to all Otsutsukis, but Kawaki shouldn't be aware of it as yet. Now, how he became aware of it is completely irrelevant, since it could just be that he tried doing it and it just worked for some reason, or maybe he remembered Jigen possessing a similar ability. Either way, the important bit is the fact that this ability comes naturally to all Otsutsukis, which includes Boruto. Now, I'm not referring to Boruto becoming 100% otsutsuki due to Momoshiki's karma, since Boruto had this ability before becoming his vessel. What I'm referring to is the fact that he's a direct descendant of a pure otsutsuki, that being Kaguya. This then takes us back to chapter 10, where Momoshiki states that Boruto carries the Byakugan blood, or in the anime where he states that he strongly inherited the powers of the otsutsuki. Now, this is important to note since the context is somewhat different between these two scenes. In the manga, Momoshiki questions why Boruto is able to sense him, which he then deduces is due to the Byakugan blood flowing within his body. This makes sense since all Otsutsukis have the innate power to use a Byakugan, despite the other dojutsus that may stem from them as well. This simply means that the Byakugan is in a sense the root dojutsu of one carrying the Otsutsuki gene. Momoshiki is able to sense this within Boruto's body since he inherited that gene from his mother Hinata, who is a member of the Hyuga clan, thus being a descendant of Hamura Otsutsuki. So even though Boruto himself doesn't possess the Byakugan, he still possesses the gene, which allows him to sense or see Momoshiki while he's in this form. So even before getting the power to erase one's chakra signature, we can see that Boruto is already being amplified by his latent Otsutsuki gene. Now, the anime interpretation went a different route in some sense, but it's more or less the same thing. You see, in this case, Momoshiki says Boruto strongly inherited the powers of the Otsutsuki in response to Boruto using his Jogan, which we know stems from the Otsutsuki since Urashiki identified it when he first saw it in the Sand Village. This means that it isn't some new eye Boruto created, it's an already existing dojutsu that the Otsutsukis are familiar with. And if Momoshiki says Boruto strongly inherited the powers of the Otsutsuki in response to seeing it, that simply means that it stems from the Otsutsuki themselves. Now, I know some of you guys are going to say that it doesn't make sense since Naruto and Hinata didn't possess this ability even though they descended from Kaguya as well, but the key difference here is that they only possessed one half of the genetic strand. This was actually hinted at in chapter 10 when Korma mentioned that Himawari having those two bloodlines is likely why she has a higher affinity to his chakra, which is also likely why he resurrected inside her body. This makes perfect sense since Kaguya merged with the Ten Tails, which was then used to create Kurama and the other tailed beast. So Himawari awakening Kaguya's chakra by combining the bloodline of her two sons would explain why she resonates with Kurama's chakra since his chakra is partly Kaguya's. The same would apply to Boruto in that he also awakened Kaguya's chakra whilst also inheriting more power from the Otsutsuki gene itself. Now, I'm not going to go in depth on this since I already covered it in this video on the screen, but I needed to bring it up again because similar to how it explains Boruto's latent potential and him having the Jogan, it also explains how he was able to use the ability to erase chakra signatures. By the way, it was also confirmed in Two Blue Vortex that Boruto has now learned how to actively use the ability, which means that it is likely something all Otsutsukis possess as stated by Ada. Now, of course, the application in this case is a bit different since Boruto isn't using it to erase his overall chakra nature, but more so applying the technique to one of his jutsus unconsciously as stated by Sasuke, which technically means that it could be applied to other techniques as well, not just his Rasengan. With that said, there is one issue, that being Delta. See, despite overpowered dojutsus like the Rinnegan and the Sharingan not being able to see it, Delta was for some reason. This was shown back in chapter 32 when Boruto hurled his Vanishing Rasengan towards Delta. She initially saw the technique become invisible as it was approaching her, but unlike Momoshiki and Sasuke, Delta was able to see the technique as clear as day using the eye of her drone. This at first seemed absolutely crazy since it implies that at least when it comes to perceptive ability, Delta's eye, which seems to work in tandem with her drone, was a cut above the rest, even the Rinnegan. Though fast forward a few years later, we come to find out that just like Ada and Damon, Delta was implanted with the cells of Shiba Otsutsuki as stated by Kashinkoji in chapter 13. And though she didn't awaken one of his Shinjutsu based abilities, the cells did amplify her existing abilities and strength. So that could technically explain why her dojutsu was able to see the technique while others could not. This also confirms that the jutsu is still within the same space or plane of existence when it becomes invisible. So it's not going between dimensions or switching places similar to Limbo, it's literally just invisible. So that further backs up my point that they should still be able to sense it. By the way, I know some people are going to argue that Momoshiki is just arrogant and that's why he didn't check for the ability when it disappeared. But the issue with this is the fact that Momoshiki did sense the ability initially and turned around, which shows that while Momoshiki is arrogant, he isn't arrogant enough to allow an ability to hit him regardless of who is wielding it. So similar to how he was being cocky when threatening the Kage but still sensed and reacted to Boruto's ability, he should have still sensed it coming. Then you have Sasuke not being able to sense the attack coming despite being fully on guard versus Borushiki, which means that arrogance has nothing to do with it. Now everything I just said could be off the mark. Maybe the ability just magically becomes invisible and undetectable because of lightning release for some reason. Maybe, right? But I think given the evidence I provided in this video, erasing chakra nature is also a possibility. Will that be the case? Maybe not, but it's a possibility. With that said, that's it for the video guys. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and also drop a like if you liked it and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.